Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I think we'll get underway for this evening's conversation. And I just wanted to start off the proceedings by introducing myself, Matt. I'm from a member of Community Voice Australia, the Central Coast. And it's my pleasure tonight to host or to be the host of four very experienced people in terms of our beekeepers. And tonight it's to hear about their experiences over the past 18 months as they've been at the forefront of the government's response to the Varroa Mite, and for them to discuss how it's transpired and some their envisioned reforms that they think could help in the future. So thank you for joining us tonight. I just wanted to introduce those of you who haven't been part of a Community Voice Central Coast talk. This is our very first online one on Zoom. I know a lot of people have been doing Zoom meetings. We've been doing a lot of in-person talks and recorded conversations, but this is our first live one. So hopefully the first of many. But just to give you an understanding of what Community Voice is about, we have been formed for about 12 months now, and we advocate for transparency and accountability from all levels of government and associated bodies. We support initiatives that protect and enhance the environment, the well-being and quality of life in our community and country. We believe people have the right to transparent information regarding any plans affecting their lives, and the community has a right to have an effective voice in decision-making. So our first speaker tonight is Kate Mason. She is a community advocate who is concerned about the lack of government and corporate media transparency, in particular relating to public-private partnership transformations being rolled out in our towns and cities. She also has extensive work history in welfare and community development. Kate is committed to people having all the information available to make informed and considered decisions on anything which impacts their lives and the environment.
Okay, so Community Voice, as Matt said, is concerned about government and public-private partnership transparency and accountability, and that community members have the ability to influence policy which affects them. And we had our eye through this whole year, we had our eye on how transparent was the Department of Primary Industries, the DPI, who were the big players involved, and how was the community and environment being affected. So I want to go through our efforts combined with the other people who are also on this Zoom who are speaking. We all combined efforts at times regarding what we have found out and what remains unanswered. So we have questions about the government Varroa Fipronil poisoning measures. I just want to give a timeline of the events. So Okay, so the New South Wales in 24th of June 2022, the New South Wales government notified beekeepers that Varroa had been found in Newcastle. On the 27th of September 2022, the DPI was authorised by the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, the APVMA, to use Fipronil to remove wild European honeybees. Research has shown that the Varroa Mite cannot attack Australian native bees directly, as native bees have a different biology. The Australian Native Bee Association stated at the time, it's no longer on their website, at the time they stated the pesticide Fipronil is being used in a baiting program in the red zones. This pesticide is highly toxic to stingless bees and may remain active within these areas for up to 3 years. They stated feral European honeybees will collect toxic sugar syrup and take it back to their nests inside hollow trees. In due course, the nests will die, leaving substantial stores of honey which will be contaminated with Fipronil inside the trees. The Fipronil may continue to remain toxic in these areas for up to 3 years. Unfortunately, native stingless bees and other nectar-feeding insects, reptiles, birds and mammals may visit these nests and collect contaminated honey, and some of these will die from Fipronil poisoning. So on the 17th of August 2023, there was a total of 600 Fipronil bait stations deployed with a forecast of another 200. In July 2023, a strategic review report of the APVMA, who approved Fipronil off-label, which means it's not for its normal use, was commissioned at the request of the Federal Agricultural Minister in response to serious allegations raised during the Senate estimates. The findings are damning and focus on concerns related to the APVMA's approach to regulation, coupled with its engagement with specific stakeholders in certain instances, has a high risk of regulatory capture by industry. On the 22nd of October this year, in an ABC article, the DPI stated Varroa was here for 1 to 1.5 years prior to mid-June 2022. I haven't seen this said anywhere else, but we knew about this antidote, and we knew about this. People have been talking about this for a few months prior, but we couldn't find any written verification until it was in the ABC article. In October of this year, Murray Watt said that there will be another report commissioned on the APVMA structure and governance, and that will be provided to the Minister by the end of September 2023. We're waiting for this review. We haven't been able to see it as of this point. By the 1st of September 2023, according to the ABC, 40 million bees had been killed across New South Wales. And again, according to the ABC, in October, more than $101 million has been spent across the response. Okay, so just quickly, just pre-2022, before all this started, there was a report had come out that found that at least 11 species of bees met International Union for Conservation of Nature criteria to be listed as threatened, and that 3 species were already currently recognised by the federal government as critically endangered. And then there's just a report that came out in 2018 where 10 million bees had died, and the beekeepers had thought it was due to Fipronil poisoning. 1 drop of this poison from 1 bee that takes it back to the hive will then kill the whole hive. Okay, so now this is the permit that was allowed. So this permit is still in force. This is the APVMA to allow supply and emergency use of an unregistered AgVet chemical for Varroa Mite. And you can see the rate that they can use it, the amounts they can use. And this is still in force. This is a new one that supplanted the previous one, and it's in force till the 30th of November 2025. If you look at and go to the APVMA website, you can see that Fipronil was nominated in 2002 for review. And then in 2000, there was a notice of extension to also review the scope to include the environment. And that was in 2012, so environmental toxicity effects. And they released, the APVMA released an environment scoping report along with a Fipronil report scope document. And in that scoping, so this is their scope, the scoping that they do, they say the environment, water, population and communities subsequently nominated Fipronil as a priority chemical for environmental review. This followed the identification of new information, primarily from the European Food Safety Authority in 2006, showing that Fipronil was highly toxic to organisms in the environment, particularly aquatic and terrestrial insects. These new studies also provided additional information on the toxicity of Fipronil to fish and aquatic invertebrates, bees and non-target arthropods. And the basis for the current reconsideration is whether the APVMA is satisfied that continued use of Fipronil will not be likely to have an unintended effect that is harmful to animals, plants, or things, or to the environment. So this is still in review. This was back in 2013, and 2002 was when the initial review occurred, and it's still being reviewed. There's nothing that's come out regarding findings as of yet. And at the same time, Fipronil was allowed off-label to be used in the bush and on people's properties to kill bees. So this is what the APVMA was meant to look at that time: aquatic degradation, persistence in the environmental media, the soil, the water, sediment, and any other, effects on insects and animals. So this is just I'll just have this as part of the thing. I won't talk about this, but at that time, there was a lot of new information coming out regarding the persistence of Fipronil in the environment that was not previously available, and that it might exceed persistent organic pollutants criteria. Okay, so just a quick rundown on Fipronil. In 2013, the EU added Fipronil to its banned pesticides list. It's a broad use insecticide and it's used to control ants, beetles, cockroaches, fleas, ticks, termites, etc. And it works by disrupting the normal function of the central nervous system. It's a controversial insecticide that was labelled a high acute risk to honeybees and was subsequently banned in 45 EU countries and restricted in the US, Canada, and UK to protect native insects and honeybees. So it's concerning that this was still allowed within Australia in 2023. And when the DPI discusses the Fipronil baiting program and people's concerns about it, I have only heard them refer to that somebody stands there when the Fipronil is put in and makes sure that no native bees come to the area. But I have never heard them address the concern of the honey that is then taken back into the nests or other things eating these dead bees, other animals. So this is just a bit more. In recent years, the toxic effects of Fipronil and its environmental products on non-target species have resulted in major restrictions being placed on its use in China, US, Europe, and South America, and that there's a lack of data regarding the toxicity to amphibians, and also that it's highly toxic to certain birds. So this is what we came across originally. It's changed now on the Australian Native Bee Association, but this is what this is where we came to and at the end of 2022 and became quite concerned about the use of Fipronil. So now what they say on here, this is taken yesterday, the DPI baiting program ended on 19th of September 2023. However, pesticide residues still in the environment from this baiting work may continue to impact local native bees and other pollinators in these areas for a long time. Unfortunately, it's difficult to know how much Fipronil could still be in the environment in a particular red zone. Okay, so what we have also is we came across is that was a report from 2013, a government report where a scientific advisory group had been requested to develop a research proposal to determine the effectiveness of killing bee nests using Fipronil, investigate the potential of this method as a useful management tool for Varroa, and determine the potential effects of this treatment method on non-target species. So they did the Fipronil traps, and what they found was the usefulness of remote treatment as a method to manage Varroa in Australia is doubtful due to several reasons. And the one most relevant to what I'm talking about is there is a risk to non-target species from Fipronil residue from the bees dying themselves and being eaten, and also in the nests. And that off-target species may come into contact with Fipronil through robbing the nest of the wax honey pollen, or through eating dead and dying bees, and that this can affect green ants, sugar ants, wasps, flies, cockroaches, lizards, cane toads, and birds and mammals. Okay, so Community Voice Australia and Save the Bees Australia started a petition back in January to stop the poisoning of Australian native bees, and we asked for the immediate halting and removal of Fipronil baiting in the New South Wales red zones, and a judicial inquiry into the relationship between government, industry-funded lobby groups and organisations representing chemical company interests. And why we asked for that chemical company interests will become apparent as I go along. And we got 35 at that time when it was lodged in Parliament, tabled in Parliament. We're up to like 37,000 signatures on that at this point in time. So this is an ABC article where they talked about our petition, and the Animal Justice Party, MLC Emma Hurst, tabled the petition in Parliament. I think that was back in August. She said the use of Fipronil was causing huge community stress. The DPI has spent over a year trying to wipe out these mites in New South Wales, and the eradication zone just keeps expanding. History shows that complete eradication of these mites is virtually impossible, and it's difficult to see how this ongoing culling program by the DPI can continue to be justified with no end in sight. We wrote to the government and we wrote to Plant Health back in April asking at what point, what are their measures and how are they going to assess when to turn from this emergency response to a plan of management. And basically from both of them, we basically got they think it's possible. So they're not moving into any sort of management or an assessment of transition has not been undertaken. So there was, from what we saw and what we assumed from these letters, was that there was no plan B at that point in April, which is 9-10 months on from when it first started. And this is the same from Plant Health Australia. They think it's feasible, therefore they haven't conducted a transition to management assessment. Okay, so I just want to go through a bit of what people have been through, what very concerned community voice with the small end of town, with small farmers, small, just normal community members and how they're being affected. So we've got Dolfi Benesh picture here in a newspaper article about him, the ABC, and Dolfi will be talking more later. But basically, Dolfi, he lost between $200,000 to $300,000 since they first started euthanizing or killing his bees. And he can just see the losses keep piling up. We have Varroa Mite response leads to crop losses, but also giant vegetables without enough bees for pollination. And we have a farmer here talking, he's not been able to grow as many zucchinis, his almond tree is bare. He said, why wasn't the pest detected sooner? And each time the mite is found, it triggers a surrounding eradication killing zone with a 10-kilometre radius. Even bees in hives without Varroa are euthanized. He says, the effect on my mental health when they killed the bees was fairly devastating. It's like losing a grandson or something like that. The New South Wales Agricultural Minister, Tara Moriarty, who recently came into the role, says the eradication effort must continue. We can't give up. We've come this far and we just can't be in a situation we just allow it to spread. She says while she understands there's many different views on strategy, people with overseas beekeeping experience are strongly advising me to keep going. So not sure who that was overseas. Matt is desperate to get bees on his vegetable farm, and he said, as a result of the bee killing, his standard pumpkin crop of 10 tonnes to the acre is down by about 70%. Ms. Moriarty said the industry body AusVeg is the main avenue for farmers to receive support. Now, if we just quickly jump to AusVeg, we see that their leading strategic partners are Syngenta and Corteva, the two of the largest chemical corporations in the world. And that will become a bit relevant why I brought that up as I go along. Now, this is after they stopped the, they went to a plan of management, another article. So more than $101 million has been spent across the response. And unfortunately, this is the DPI Director General, Mr. Hansen. Unfortunately, as it turned out with Newcastle, we now know it arrived 12 to 18 months before it became obvious. These time lags really are an impediment to an effective eradication response. So my question and our question to the DPI, which hasn't been answered at this point in time, is when did they know? What date did they know that information on? And at that point, where it'd been in New South Wales for up to 1.5 years prior, how did they expect to be able to contain it at that point? And why didn't they go to a plan of management and make that really transparent to the public and everyone affected by these measures? Beekeepers were traumatised. This is the Evans family. It just destroyed us. It was terrible, James Evans said. And Mark Goodwin, a bee scientist who helped lead New Zealand through its Varroa response, said that while eradication of the mite was not impossible in theory, the rapid spread of the mite indicates that it may now be too late. The scenario of eradication is complicated enough, but you also need to be very, very confident about where Varroa is and isn't before you go down that track, he said. If this was New Zealand, we would not have gone to eradication unless we were absolutely confident that we knew everywhere Varroa was, which isn't the case in New South Wales. Another article about people being decimated, their livelihoods being decimated and the distress it caused them. 2/3 of their business eradicated and not compensated fairly for the income that's lost. It's going to take a long time to be able to rebuild. And the transition to management is a little too late for many beekeeping families. She questioned the Department of Primary Industry's decision to pursue mite eradication. We feel that once the spread of the mite was found in the almonds orchards, that the DPI wouldn't have the resources to be able to maintain it. And that at that time they should have paused and reassessed the situation. And again, as many of these articles stress that people's mental health and distress has been really, really heightened because of the government's response. There would have been people that could have been looking at suiciding because of the toll it's been having on their families and their finances, their mental health. This is going to take a very long time to get over. Okay, so we just quickly go into the APVMA. So we'd have to have a lot of trust in the APVMA, this governing body, to allow Fipronil off-label to be put all through the environment. So it's important to focus on the APVMA. It's a cost-covered agency with funding received from levies, fees, and charges. And so you can see the income for 2022 to 2023 was $47 million. And out of that, $45 million came from industry fees and charges. And that's just levies charged on chemical products. Okay, so in, I think it was June or July, a report came out from the law firm Clayton Utz that was commissioned by Murray Watt, and the findings were concerningly, the review found serious allegations of chemical industry capture of the APVMA, which appears to have played a key role in the organisation not performing its full regulatory responsibilities. They found the authority which approves products like weed killer glyphosate was taking decades to review chemicals. Of the 10 ongoing chemical reviews, 8 have been in progress for over 15 years or more, with 7 ongoing for nearly 20 years. And as I said, Fipronil's been ongoing since 2002, so that's 21 years. And in that report, to just pull out, this is their quotes, the APVMA's approach to regulation appears to align with industry interests. There are instances where the APVMA's level of engagement with industry stakeholders should be carefully examined. Information reviewed includes instances where the APVMA's approach appears focused on assisting industry. A majority of the APVMA's ongoing chemical reviews have been in process for nearly 2 decades. And of note is that the APVMA is predominantly funded by the industry it's tasked to regulate. And in our view, this is a highly problematic model and fraught with potential for corporate capture over a government body. Okay, so Murray Watt also has now gone on to commission Mr. Matthews to conduct a rapid evaluation into the operations of the APVMA. Concerningly, the Clayton Utz review found serious allegations of industry capture of the APVMA. And it was meant to get to Murray Watt on October the 27th to submit the report. Now, this is just quickly CropLife defending. And I'll go and talk a little bit more about CropLife, but CropLife defending the APVMA and pretty much calling for that it keeps independent and it doesn't have more government regulation or overview is how I read that article. This is CropLife. CropLife Australia members represent 85% of crop protection, which means the pesticides, insecticides, and 95% of crop biotech products used by Australian farmers. And you can see that it's the big chemical companies, and glyphosate, they're a big proponent of glyphosate. This is what they put into government in 2022 as to what they would like to see happen. They would like to strengthen the regulatory environment by removing barriers to innovation and growth. So less regulation, I would read that as. Improve access to crop protection, which is pesticides, for minor uses. Introduce national legislation for GM crops and remove any of the state-based moratoriums. Introduce voluntary labelling requirements for approved GM crops and fund communication campaigns to counter misinformation regarding ag biotech as well as chemical and biological crop protection products. It's a national peak industry organisation representing agricultural, chemical and plant biotech sector in Australia. And it's also a member of CropLife Asia and part of the CropLife International Federation of 91 CropLife national organisations globally. And we looking at CropLife, you go through and you can see governments works, very much with CropLife. So I will just whiz through this because I'm going to run out of time. But, here we can see Murray Watt going to addressing the CropLife Agricultural Industry Federal budget breakfast. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about just broaden this out a tiny bit, and just to show how CropLife and these massive corporate chemical companies are working hand in hand with government. So this was about neonicotinoids. That was a great concern. And in April 2018, the European Union decided to ban all outdoor uses. And there was 232 scientists published an open letter to policymakers calling on other countries around the world to also restrict the use. And the APVMA, I'm assuming, is currently assessing that chemical as well. So here we have Plant Health, and they put on a talk and invited stakeholders come along. And at that talk, you have international representatives from Bayer and Syngenta attending and supplying information. And a question and answer session took place with representatives from the CSIRO, Bayer, Syngenta, APVMA, and CropLife Australia. And in summary, the overall message conveyed at this was that neonicotinoids are unlikely to presenting any greater threat to honeybees and crop pollination. So here we have massive chemical global corporations sitting with government talking about how these products are safe. Okay, so we look a little bit broader afield, and Australian food is growing with dangerous chemicals banned in other countries. It's got a global reputation as a source of clean food. In fact, the country has some of the most lax regulation of pesticide use in the Western world. There are more than 70 chemicals no longer in use in Europe because of their toxicity to humans, animals, and the environments, but are still in routine use in Australia. And the environmental groups such as the National Toxic Networks have called on the Albanese government to investigate Australia's agricultural chemical regulation. So again, they were also calling on that there's periodic reviews. I can't read my screen at the moment, something's on top of it, but 10 to 15 years in other countries where they're reviewed, which doesn't happen in Australia. This is the United Nations report to the United Nations, seeds central to people's food systems, cultures, and human rights. And they're talking about the big four agrochemical companies, which are Bayer, Corteva, BASF, and Syngenta, and that they have 60% of the global seed market and 75% of the pesticides market, leading to a stranglehold. We're just going on and just talking a little bit about these chemical companies that are involved with CropLife. We've got Bayer, which has just recently settled thousands of US Roundup weed killer lawsuits as part of an $11 billion settlement with the lawyers who took cases to trial over allegations of the herbicide causing cancer. And they talk here, this was 5 or 6 years ago, Monsanto has specifically gone out of its way to bully and to fight independent researchers. That was shown through internal Monsanto emails, and that it showed how the agrochemical company rejected critical research and expert warnings over the years while pursuing and helping to write favourable analyses of their products. They fought science. And there's also a lawsuit in Melbourne at the moment with 800 Australians regarding Roundup who've been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations and CropLife have just created in 2020, they renewed and strengthened their commitment to work together and find new ways to transform agri-food systems. And here we have Via Campesina, which is looking out for small landholders, saying the Food and Agricultural Organisation must remain neutral and cannot be co-opted by private interests attempt to realise profits at the expenses of small-scale food producers, consumers, local communities, and the environment. Now, we're lucky in Australia, we've got an organisation called Gene Ethics who's been looking at chemicals and genetically modified products since 1988, I think it is. And I'm about to finish, but I'm just finishing on a couple of last things. Have already put out what they want to the government, and they want base regulatory assessments of agri-chemicals and GM organisms on independent scientific evidence, not industry-generated data that's unpublished and not peer-reviewed. And they want this to all be much more transparent and open and precautionary. They want to reinstate the chemical assessment and re-registration scheme, which is where the chemicals are regularly reassessed. And they state CropLife Australia is the local branch of a global network of lobbyists which operate in 92 countries to promote genetically modified animals, plants, and microbes and agrochemicals. This is done on behalf of member companies which supply 85% of agrochemicals and 95% of crop biotech products sold to Australian farmers. Okay, so this is our last, or close to last. We have a letter we sent off the petition to Murray Watt and also lately to Tara Moriarty, and then to Murray Watt. What we've really asked is we want a public review into the process whereby the APVMA granted the use of Fipronil off-label, what scientific studies they relied upon to take this action, what other bodies were involved in the decision-making, what risk assessments did they conduct, a thorough independent assessment regarding the subsequent cumulative impacts on the environment through the baiting stations, make available a service which the public can contact if they see any disturbing implications for wildlife near where a baiting station was placed, and how much Fipronil was used, how the DPI plans on decontaminating these areas. So we're still waiting to hear back from Murray Watt regarding those questions. I'm just going to finish on this for people that are interested in learning about more natural ways of dealing with Varroa. This is somebody that can be recommended, scientificbeekeeping.com. So that's just me in a nutshell. So looking at Fipronil turned into looking at bigger structures in place, which then turned to looking at a lot of the chemicals and what's going on and what's of concern. We want to, as Community Voice, keep working on this in a broad way because everything has an effect on the bees, but also looking at the use of chemicals on our environment. So if anyone is interested in working with this and helping us with a working group, if you can send, I think the email is in the chat, you can send an email over to Community Voice, or you could put your email down into the chat if you don't mind. That will be public, so it's up to you. But I will finish there.
Thank you, Kate. It's a wealth of information. I'm sure some of it you may not even be aware of. Next, I want to introduce Simon Mulvany. Simon is the founder and CEO of Save the Bees Australia. Save the Bees Australia is focused on community education and advocacy for Australian native bees and European honeybees. The organisation was started as a rescue mission to rehome honeybee infestations and save them from extermination. Since then, the organisation has saved over 400 colonies, and I'm sure that's growing, and has evolved to become the voice of bees Australia-wide. Over to you, Simon.
So, yeah, thanks a lot there, Kate. That was an incredible amount of information we got there. And I appreciate how much work you've put in. I guess what we learn from with what you've said is something that I've known for quite a while, that the industry does seem to be captured by these big chemical companies. In regards to Fipronil, I think we and other beekeepers have been calling for a ban for Fipronil for the life of Save the Bees, pretty much, which is nearly 10 years. So it's interesting to find out that it has been up for review. I think you said there for about 12 years. I think all of us here, it's very frustrating because from day dot, when Varroa arrived, we knew that this program wasn't going to work. And it was, I know a lot of us, Dolfi, Steve, from the start, urged Parliament to not allow this baiting program to go through, and that the killing was going to be pointless. And so since then, I think the ABC said $101 million, but I've heard it's more like $130 million. The other thing I'm incredibly concerned about is the erratic sort of way that they put the Fipronil out. They seem to aim it in built-up areas or suburban areas like Avoca and Newcastle, and whereas what the people in New Zealand said, which would have been a lot better, is you find exactly how far the mite has gone before you start a poisoning program like that at all. I hate to think of the amount of Indigenous bees that are probably still getting killed or were killed, but it sounds like the DPI will never be able to totally answer our questions in regards to how much Fipronil went out and how much damage has been caused from that Fipronil. At the end of when you were talking, Kate, you said, is there anyone interested in helping in regards to these types of issues? One thing beekeepers have urged me before is to continue this fight to get Fipronil in certain uses banned. And we would like to, obviously, they probably knew this information before even beginning, but never again do we want to see the baiting of honeybees with a poison. I just, hopefully, not that it has many other places in the world to infest, but that's possibly one of the stupidest things our government's ever done, and or the DPI's done. And yeah, they've probably done some pretty silly stuff before. I think it was very unfair the way they divided the beekeeping community as well. So there are concerns, for the damage of, like I think it was said in one of the articles, it's for people, it was like losing their pet dog or grandchild. So it was trauma that was really unnecessary to exist in the first place. From there, the other thing that was disappointing, there seemed to be a lot of bias to people doing the almond pollination as opposed to people doing honey or other pollination. So there seemed to be a terrible double standard. I think the other thing, and I don't know where this could lead if we do have an inquiry, but if it is shown that the DPI had knowledge of it being here, a lot longer than it has been, where do we go from there? And I think that's what we're looking at here. How did this continue when they knew it was so much further reaching before they even began the slaughter? But yeah, look, it wasn't that long after our first meeting that the whole thing was called off. I'd like to think it was the one thing I did notice. I was onto the DPI as soon as they announced that the eradication had ended, and they were very forthright in saying that the Fipronil was going to end. And so I think that was their Achilles heel. And I think us standing up and that meeting that you put together, Kate, in Evoca last year, I think that really made a difference with the pressure. So thanks again, everyone here who took part in that. And if people who are listening who signed the petition, I think it really did help. And so thanks, community voice there. Yeah, this fight will continue. Thanks, Kate. Matt.
Thanks, Simon. Next, we have Steve Fuller. So Steve has over 40 years experience with beekeeping and industry bodies. His portfolio includes the advisory panel member for AgriFutures Australia, Honeybee and Pollination, past president of the New South Wales Aparists Association at the time of the incursion, secretary of the Crop Pollination Association of Australia, 5 Bees participant, and the regional advisory member for national parks involved with research, development and extension. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Matt. I think those two acts are going to be a bit hard for me to follow, but thanks again. And look, welcome to everyone who has come here tonight. Just going back in history, I was president of New South Wales Aparists Association for just on 14 days. when the Varroa Mite incursion was put in my lap, we actually thought we had a plan in place that would handle this. And yeah, we sort of gone, rightio, let's take stock of it. Now, that was a Wednesday that it was first rang to me. I had to go to Queensland and deliver it to Queensland. I've never done something like this before, or any of my capacity dealing with an incursion of this size. It's the biggest incursion in Australia's history, let alone New South Wales. We were treading water. To give you an idea, in the first week of the incursion, we bought Bunnings out of every bottle of methylated spirits in the Hunter Valley, every coverall, and every rubber boot. Now, when I say that, and why I say that is that we were treating this as a virus. This was not a virus, this was a pest. So when we first started treating it, as I said, this is an emergency that we go into. It's always hectic the first couple of days and things like this. But I do believe after a couple of weeks, the first 2 to 3 weeks, things should have settled down. Moving right along, Kate alluded to that we didn't have a plan B. Exactly right. That was identified within the first 3 weeks. Where is our plan B? What's going to happen if we can't eradicate this? What happens if it moves into the feral colonies? How far is it going to go? There was a lot of scenarios, a lot of situations to actually work out and try and forward plan for. It was actually put on my lap on how are we going to bait the feral hives. We had massive discussions of this for about 2 to 3 weeks. And this is where I do believe that we lost it. Our biggest thing is that feral hives are unchecked. All you guys that had hives, we could ring you up and say, check your hives for Varroa Mite. We know where they are, where they're very accessible to actually use as a surveillance tool. And I was fighting from the inside saying, why are we killing hives that are clean? No mites detected. They say, oh, well, if we eliminate the bees, then they can't get infected with the Varroa Mite. But if we knew it was spreading or it was getting infected, it's an area we could concentrate on. So all in all, I believe we lost it about 4 weeks into this. People sort of say, okay, why? 4 weeks into this, there was an order come through that you're allowed to move bees. And I had a picture, not 20 metres apart. On one side, people were working bees, and then there's a fence line. And on the other side of the fence line was a red zone. And there they were, DPI euthanizing hives only 20 metres apart. If anyone knows anything about hives, the drift, even at 20 metres apart, is phenomenal. It only takes 1 or 2 bees to go over the fence. A bee doesn't recognise a fence. A bee doesn't recognise red zones and purple zones. So I was pretty well, I won't say ostracised, but when my name gets mentioned in certain meetings, people cringe, people duck for cover. Moving right along, I was asked to go in September last year to a Senate inquiry. And in that Senate inquiry, I was asked, in my personal opinion, could we eradicate? And no, I was strongly for no. And the 2 reasons being, it's feral hives and beekeepers not complying. And I'm not saying just commercial guys. There was some backyarders doing wrong too. Now, when I say a beekeeper, although I am a commercial, I don't distinguish. If you have 1 hive or you have 1,000 hives, you keep bees. We are all in this together. Because what I do with my bees can affect you, and what you do with your bees can affect me. So I was fighting for everyone. I argued and argued and argued about the killing of hives, because when you look up the definition of euthanize you euthanize something that is incurable. Around the world, we have learnt to live with Varroa. The thing is, we need to learn here in Australia. But what happened is they kept on making us like a police state. They wouldn't let us manage our bees. This is DPI I'm talking. Every time you'd say, I'll do this. No, I can't do that. But then they would tell us how to do it. These are all issues that, as far as we're concerned, as beekeepers, we should be allowed to have every tool in the toolbox. Now, when I say every tool in the toolbox, I'm not just saying chemicals. You can easily manage Varroa through natural remedies. It just means that you have to work and have to manage your hives a heck of a lot more intensely. Instead of having 10 hives, have 5 hives. Fine, you still have your bees and you can manage them. Chemicals are not the one-stop answer for everything. As far as I'm concerned, and I've been on a lot of programs lately where we've been talking about chemicals. To me, chemicals are the last resort. As far as I'm concerned, I produce organic honey. I don't want chemicals in my honey. I also have pollination. I don't want chemicals killing my bees in pollination. Chemicals, nah, last resort. Let's go natural. And there's plenty of information, and I will supply Kate with as much as I can to get up on the website. Look, as I said, just quickly, grapefruit leaves, using them in your smoker. Rhubarb leaves, once again, they work. We've got research going at the moment in tea tree oil. We've got research also going on eucalyptus oil, pseudoscorpions, nematodes, all these sorts of things. So these are all naturally occurring items that does not affect your hive and does not affect your honey. So these are all available. The biggest thing with small farmers, or for small farms wanting alternative, everyone keeps on talking about bees. It's not just bees. We have butterflies, we have moths, we have birds, we have animals. We have lots of things that are alternative pollinators. So bats are a major pollinator for bananas. I know not everyone wants to have a bat in the backyard, but what I'm saying is that there is more than bees. Our native bees in Australia, there's plenty of motels that you can make to make and encourage native bees to come into your backyard. The beauty of native bees, they don't sting. You can go and buy a native bee hive, have the kids running around the backyard, they don't sting. Beautiful little bees, absolutely fascinating. So moving along, lessons we've learnt. I'm sorry to say, I've still got that big stick. I've broken too many big sticks trying to teach people on what the lessons have we learnt. The thing is, we are damn lucky in some senses, but sadly unlucky that it was our industry that got attacked with Varroa. But hey, if it was foot and mouth and DPI handled an incursion of foot and mouth like this, our meat and livestock industry would be decimated. Now, I'm just going to go a little bit further. What would have happened if it had been a Ebola or something like that that affected humans and it was handled like this? Like, I'm sorry, put it in perspective. Why weren't we running around shooting everyone that got COVID? That's exactly what they were doing to our beehives. They were destroying things because they didn't have it. So we're now 18 months, almost 18 months into this, and we still haven't got Plan B. We're up to Plan B version 4, but I can't tell you. And I'm ahead of a crop pollination, and I'm supposed to be involved with all the decision making, and I cannot tell you where we're going. That's sad. 18 months into something, and we still got no direction. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got a lot of answers, and I am pushing so hard that we need a parliamentary inquiry into the whole handling of this. This has to, at the end, be pulled apart and reviewed on why and how everything went on. Look, that's all for me. I'm happy to take questions. And thank you all again for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Moving on to our final speaker tonight is Dolfi Benesh. In late 2022, Dolfi had 60 healthy hives exterminated in Gillaby on the central coast of New South Wales. He's invested many years of hard work establishing a small boutique business producing and selling quality honey. Dolfi has been requesting the scientific modelling underpinning the DPI's Varroa Mite strategy with no information supplied at this point. He is instrumental in organising a class action against Commonwealth and state authorities to ensure those whose bees have been killed receive appropriate compensation. Over to you, Dolfi.
Good evening. Thank you for everybody, especially Kate's done amazing work. Like I've had to look again on the information. I'm reading through all the time, but it's mind-boggling all the time how we can go and use poison that probably shouldn't be used even as a nerve gas against humans. It's something that should be banned completely. I'd like just to wrap it in a very pinpoint where I can see the DPI done the mistakes and what they should have done wrong as plan B, as Steve suggested, because it's very easy to see what have they done wrong. I'm coming from a place that had Varroa. If you know Varroa, you know that you can't basically stop it. And you have to go immediately to plan B and treat plan B as the plan. And that means treatment. And that makes all the bees surveillance bees, if they have Varroa, or the one that you find with Varroa, they become immediately surveillance bees. You can take them home, you can move them around, put them at home, and treat them. And that makes life simple, because then every bee that you have, every beehive is basically under surveillance. You know the condition, you know if the Varroa is moving around. And basically where we see the Varroa moving, it moves actually via the feral bees. And the feral bees will keep swarming and moving around, drifting bees with Varroa, another thing. And this is pretty much where the DPI missed completely everything. The concept of, yes, we can stop it, was upfront a concept that, you know, you can't use. If you know Varroa, you know all the knowledge that's been accumulated since, say, 1975 until now. You look at all the books, you look at all the information, you know that you have a problem. Once the problem is defined, then you say, okay, let's treat it. And that would solve everything, because we didn't need to go into the killing of the bees. We've killed about 90,000 hives at my last count, 52,000 in the Griffith area, and about 33,000 in the Central Coast. All these could have been surveillance bees. Even the one that doing, for example, pollination. You can take the bees back home, put them as a fixed position and treat them and see what is their condition. As soon as you clean them or improve their condition, if they are not infested enough, you can move them around and keep going as usual. The whole idea of let's stop it and create a drama out of it and put the pressure into the system, onto the beekeepers, came to me as out of nowhere. This looks like someone adopted an idea taken from different world of science, doesn't exist in the scientific world, and said, okay, let's do this. And this was purely a trial on the back of the beekeepers. This trial has caused damage of 90,000 hives dead. And to the best of my knowledge now, there are lots of beekeepers now selling half price, selling their bees just giveaway. They don't want to touch them. Not only the one that got killed, some of the beekeepers just lost it. For one, to treat the bees. Two, to sell the honey on a price that is less than half now than 10 years ago. And the DPI giving the hard time to the beekeepers as if they own the bees that belong to the beekeepers. All these things accumulated together to a misconception of we know better, we know science that is not existing, been taken completely the wrong path, and pinpoint every beehive should have been surveillance with the Varroa. There's no reason to kill them. You can put them in one place. If you have one beehive with Varroa, or say you are a commercial beekeeper like Steve, and you found like you have 2 positions with Varroa, these become surveillance bees. You leave them in one position, but you keep working with the other ones as usual. You can't say to a beekeeper who brought to Griffith 500 hives, right, you need to kill all of them because they are in the red zone. The one that been defined with Varroa need to be taken home and be surveillance bees and treat them, because all of them eventually will have Varroa. It's not going to be stopped. The feral bees will keep moving around. And this is pretty much in the nutshell. The mistake has been done from day one. The DPI has adopted something that should have been there from the beginning. And all the rest is just history. That's it pretty much.
Thank you, Dolfi. All right, we'll move on. I've got at this stage, we've got 2 questions for Steve in the chat, but we'll go to Steve first. And if anyone else has any information, they're welcome to speak up, Simon or Dolfi. So the first one, Steve, is what is happening for aporists in the red zone regarding restocking and restarting their business?
Okay, really good question. So 3 months ago, you weren't allowed to have a bee in a red zone. Today, you can do what you want, which is mind-boggling. I know we have our orange area and we have our green area, but if you wish to bring bees back into the so-called management area, you are allowed to. I can tell you, I know of bees that have been brought back in, and 48 hours later, they have Varroa Mite. Some of the loads are actually unbelievable. It's not just 1 or 2 Varroa. This is within 2 days. I think the biggest was about 16 Varroa in one hive. And another one after 2 weeks, the load was up into the hundreds. So, yes, you are allowed to bring bees in to those orange zones. And that's the Hunter Sydney area, Central Coast, of course, and Kempsey area. What I would say is it's a time, if you do bring those bees back in, learn how to live with Varroa before the viruses hit. The biggest thing that's going to hurt our beekeeping world is the viruses. Now, Varroa is not hard to live with. As I said, there's a lot of natural ways. It just means that you can't leave them and not go near them for months and months. You really need to keep an eye on your hive every month. And if you see it stressing, then you may have to use it like an oxalic acid or fog it, or may have to use a chemical. But while ever the hive stays strong, you don't have to use anything. Try not to use chemicals. So hopefully that's answered that. And as I said, watch your numbers. If you feel overwhelmed working 20, drop back to 10. Don't take on too much work. That's where Varroa will be on top of you. It is hard work.
Thanks, Steve. Another one for you. Does the alcohol wash actually work on hives with minor mite load? E.g., could it be actually missed?
I hate the alcohol wash. It is only used as a surveillance method on high mite load instances. So if your hive is critically high, then the alcohol wash will find mites. The thing is, the best way that you're going to actually find mites in your hive is drone uncapping. Simplest, easiest, no alcohol, nothing around hot smokers. Please try and do a drone uncapping first. Now, if you want another way that's better than an alcohol or just as good or better, is a low sud wash. Now, Coles has a ultra concentrate low sud wash, and that works just as well. Sugar shakes, you really need to do the sugar shake twice. So, and make sure you really use a fine, it's either dusting sugar or icing sugar, and do one, tip that out, do another roll. So your second roll is your main one. As I said, as far as I'm concerned, throw the alcohol out the window. And really, if you want to be thorough, the main one is miticide strips for 6 days. It will not hurt your hive for 6 days. fogging does work, but fogging, you've got to be careful. Even though it's a natural acid, it can be very dangerous.
Thanks, Steve. Dolfi, did you want to add anything to that?
I wouldn't use the organic acids as fogging like Steve suggested. I would probably prefer to mix it in water and just spray the bees, like giving them a wash. This is a gentle shower, and that it's a safe way. Probably need to look at concentration. I think it's about 3.5% concentration in water. So it's quite easy to create 10 liters of spray and spray a few hives. I think that a quantity of 0.5 kilogram of oxalic acid should be enough, like for something, I don't know, like 100 beehives or more. So there is a lot of safe ways to basically treat the bees and get them sorted. But need to look at also quantities of Varroa. If you have enough ways to check it, I also recommend have a look and learn to visualize, because you can see the Varroa on the back of the bee or on the abdomen of the bee. So you will need at some stage to go put the goggles, take a magnifying glass and just have a look at the bees. You will be able to see the Varroa. And if you are not sure if you have them or not, as Steve said, you just go to the brood, male brood, uncapping 100 of them and tap them on the floor on a white sheet, and you should be able to see the red spots if you have Varroa.
Thanks, Dolfi. I've got another question here for Steve about what about the honey that could be collected in the red zones. How do we know there is no Fipronil in it?
That's the problem. We don't know. So the thing is, they are doing tests at the moment. We have to use, once again, good beehives and send them out, and then we analyze the honey. It's the only way. The problem is, and one of the articles Kate presented is a really good scenario, is that it could be years before bees actually find that hive that holds Fipronil. Now they say, oh, it's got a half-life and all that, but are we going to risk it? That's the question. How much Fipronil that they say, oh, well, we only use 0.001 milliliter or something, you know, in honey. But bees have got a real good knack of dehydrating the nectar that they bring in, and then that could actually raise it back up. So at this point in time, I know they are trying to work out a way of actually surveilling that, but as far as I know, they haven't hit on an actual plan other than using beehives and then analysing honey that they collect.
Thanks, Steve. This one, probably, Simon, you have an answer to the question. It's not said to anyone, but obviously let me know. Is the mite more likely to happen in a weak hive, or it doesn't matter? Question. And would you split a hive sooner than usual to avoid overcrowded hives and reduce the risk of Varroa, or is it not relevant?
I'll answer this the best I can. You got me there, Matt. Yeah, Dolfi's probably an expert on this because I've heard Dolfi has dealt with the mites before, and I do know that in listening to Dolfi that a crowded hive actually deals with the mite a lot better. The other thing I've been talking about with Steve is not one colony has been killed that we know of from the mite yet here, and that has a lot to do with the fact that the mites here that we've got haven't got the viruses with them. And I've also, in talking to Steve, these viruses can only come in through imported bees or imported queens or imported drone sperm. So that biosecurity measure of stopping bees coming in should sort of be on high alert so we don't get the viruses in as well. Yeah, you might just go back to Dolfi for further information in regards to the splitting of hives and giving them more room, but I think they should be left more congested if possible.
As a rule of thumb, basically, the Varroa will get to any hive, the weak and the strong alike. But in order to make sure that the hive can actually mitigate and struggle the Varroa and actually keep going as usual, you would like to have it crowded or populated well. You would like to see the bees everywhere in good condition, and you need for that a good queen, of course, that will lay eggs all the time. You'll see all the time lots of brood, and they'll keep the hive working as usual, even if it's got Varroa. I've seen lots of hive producing honey and doing pollination with the Varroa with no problem. It takes a while before the hives start to slow down because of the Varroa, and even then it's treatable, and in 3 to 6 days you can see the hive comes back to life.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Dolfi and Simon. I think that is all the questions we've got in the chat for the moment. So I just unless anyone
Matt,
yes.
Yeah, just there's a little one back up from Ron. Does Varroa carry the same risk as small hive beetle in killing hives? If the guys don't mind, I'll come in on that, because I deal with hive beetle up here all the time.
Go for it.
Okay. What Simon said is correct. There has not been a hive yet identified as being killed by Varroa in Australia. Every hive that's been killed has been killed by DPI. We found hives that we know that that Varroa has been in for a long time, because we found a lot of skeletons in them. Now, when you move to small hive beetle, and I used to get in trouble for saying this, Varroa to me is a lot easier to deal with than small hive beetle. Small hive beetle will kill your hive within 3 days. Now, the thing is, when hive beetle come into your hive, and you open a hive and you see 4 or 5 hive beetle running around, there'll be 5 times more hive beetle in that hive than what you'll actually see. So small hive beetle are a very opportunistic pest. So when you have a nice crowded hive, like what Dolfi and Simon were just talking about, and the bees go outside to cool off, these small hive beetle start running around shooting an enzyme into the honey. And that enzyme then makes it ferment. The bees don't like the smell, the bees move out. Now, the small hive beetle aren't after the honey. They're only producing a smell to drive the bees out so that the small hive beetle can attack the larvae and the pollen. That's where their protein is. That's where all their nutrients. That's all they're after. Now, on the other hand, small hive beetle, it produces a yeast, and I get it wrong every time I say it. Anyway, there's a yeast that's made from the small hive beetle that is known to have killed 29 people around the world. Now, this is people who have respiratory problems and things like this. So these are, you can now see how dangerous small hive beetle is. And why do we call it small hive beetle? Because there's another one called the large hive beetle. It's 10 mil big, and the bees cannot get it out. It's like a Sherman tank, and it just walks straight through. And it's unbelievable. It's a lot worse than small hive beetle. So Varroa, you get Varroa. Come back to what I said before. You manage your hive, you make an idea on it. If you need to check this, you do it this way, treat that way, do it that way. At the end of the day, you could have a hive for 12 months with Varroa. Doesn't mean it's going to kill it. So you've got 12 months to realize how to work with Varroa. Small hive beetle, 3 days. Big difference. And not only that, once you have hive beetle, that honey is lost. You might as well burn the frames, everything else. With Varroa, stick the whole hive in a freezer, or the frames in the freezer. Once a hive has no bees in it for 10 days, you can restock it. Big difference. So coming back, yes, I was around when small hive beetle was introduced to Australia. It got found in Australia. And we heard exactly what they're saying now. It's going to designate the bee industry. it's going to cost this and it's going to cost that. It's going to kill the feral hives. It's going to do this. You know what? We've learnt to live with it. And if it's a lot harder to live with than Varroa, I reckon a Varroa is going to be a walk in the park.
I'd like to say, in addition to what Steve said, if as someone who knows the small hive beetles and the Varroa very well, I'll take Varroa any day, any day. The small hive beetle is a nightmare. It simply can't be. I don't know. For me, sometimes I'm just getting desperate from the small hive beetle. The Varroa is something that we can treat so easy. There's no need even to think about it as something that will be that much of a problem. The small hive beetle drives us nuts. It can cause damage. It can kill 100 beehives in 2 weeks' time. If you haven't paid attention, you just didn't visit them, and that's it. They've gone. And I've seen lots of those going completely. The beehive just disappears. If then you're back, the beehive that had 20, 30 kilos of honey in it, 2 days, you're coming back, it's all gone. Rubbish.
Okay, thanks, guys. Another question has come in. Is there any risk that chemical measures for Varroa will be mandated? I think this is for you, Steve.
If they had their way, yes. But the industry's not going to allow it. And once again, when I say industry, I mean all beekeepers. I listen to backyarders. I listen to everyone. I listen to scientists. I listen because I'm involved with so much. We can't just have chemicals. We have to have a full toolbox. We have to have what works for you doesn't work for me and all this. Or, hey, if I've only got one hive, why do I have to go and buy a heap of chemicals to try and make it work? As we heard, like, as a community group, you might get together and go, hey, we'll all fog it at one time. That's a great idea. Why? Because when I say fog, I'm just saying that as an example. Because if I do something and my neighbour doesn't, I could be chasing my bees to there and we're chasing it around. What we need to do is get a collective. Today is the day we're going to attack Varroa mite, and that could be better. So I'm against just having chemicals, and I'll argue that point until I'm black and blue, and I'm pretty solid on that one. We've got to have organic, natural, and so on like that. It's got to be there. It's got to be available.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And another question, I'll start with you, Simon. Hopefully this one is better. Why do you think the DPI went nuts over Varroa?
Well, there's a couple of things to unpack there. One is, did the DPI know it had been here a lot longer than what it had been here for? And so, that being the case, why didn't they tell the public about it? So that's one question we need to be answered. The other thing is, there had been a plan in place, and the plan wasn't a very good plan, but they thought they had to stick to it. And if Varroa had first arrived at the port and they had have killed off a radius of 25 k's and it wasn't in the feral populations, there's an idea that plan could have worked. So we've spoken at length about the errors of the DPI, but they should have done the surveillance a lot longer than they did the killing. And why was that bloodthirst? I just think it was fear and irrational behaviour, and maybe a little bit of malevolence from the pharmaceutical industry. The people were just terrified, and Australia was the last standing continent in the world without Varroa, so there was a lot of pressure from the other states to get it done. But so many problems with how it rolled out initially, including getting all beekeeping volunteers to do the work. And in fact, it was probably more likely that through that calamity, Varroa was spread more rather than, being effective in that first killing spree.
Steve, did you want to answer?
We had a plan. We had to have a red hot shot right at the start. I believe after that first month, we should have reassessed it. I strongly believe that egos got involved then, and by December it got politicalised, and after that, that's where the politicals throwing backwards and forth. And this is, yeah, I'm sorry, but I believe it's gone from a response to a political football, and this is why I'm calling so hard, because like the waste of money. You know, there's no education yet. There's nothing started yet. Once again, plan B. Where is it? Still not there. So yeah, I totally do believe they went silly and lost it at the start.
Thanks, Steve. Another one for you, Steve. If you're starting again with a hive, do you have to spray them with chemicals from the legislation?
No, Maya.
No. So what happens there? What it is, you only have to, when you surveil the hive, if there's more than 6 mites, you notify the DPI, and then a treatment must come into place. Now, Formic Pro is a formic acid, so it's a natural occurring acid, and you can use that to treat, and that is readily available now. So what you need to do, there is a couple of, well, okay, on my Facebook page of Crop Pollination Association Australia, sorry about that, guys, but I do have a list of chemicals that are approved. But I wouldn't, if I was starting again, I would not, I'd stay natural. I'd use a drone frame. I would put a drone frame in and let the queen lay drone, and because they're, Varroa Mite are highly attractive to drone brood. So, and you can pull that out, put it in the freezer, kill them, give them a new frame, and you can most probably monitor and also manage your Varroa levels just through drone manipulation.
Thank you. Dolfi, did you, I forgot to pass over to you. Did you want to provide an answer about why you think the DPI went very intense?
I'll go with a question that will be a question to answer the question. I've asked the DPI to give us a DNA test of the Varroa. A DNA test of the Varroa would give us all the information under the sun, where it's coming from, how long it's been here. I've got scientists that can read the information. The university, it costs about $300. I know how the test looks like. I know how to run it. If they don't know how to run it, I can do it in the lab in the Sydney University or the UNSW. There's lots of happy scientists that will do it for $500. I'm really puzzled with all this secrecy around it, as if science was invented the day the Varroa arrived to Australia. There's a bit of science, you know, the world is very educated and updated nowadays. Every year, the science is doubling the quantity of knowledge and information that we have. We cannot come up at 2022 June and say we have a new science and we know everything and nobody knows anything, and you do what we tell you to do. You know, this is beyond me. Like, and it looks like a very small group of people within the DPI, as Steve suggested, you know, took it on, you know, on the ego ride. We'll do it because we can, and they treated Australia as if it's a backyard country somewhere, I don't know, in Europe, which is about 100 k's by 100 k's, and they forgot it's a massive country with massive capacity of survival of bees, and we don't know even how strong bees are in Australia yet with the pollen and all what they're feeding here. And you know what, even the angles of the sun have some factors with the Varroa here. I think that if we get enough hot weather with hot sun, that'll be weakening the Varroa and give us lengthy times with no treatment for the Varroa. So yeah, the DPI here, they missed a lot by not giving the information and not being open to use the existing science and mitigate this problem as fast as possible. It just exposed them to be blamed even more for the bringing of the small hive beetle into Australia, because basically they fail with the small hive beetle much harder. And I know how the small hive beetle was imported to Australia by honey importers. I know the guy who worked at port, and he saw with his own eyes how the small hive beetle is getting imported within IBCs that coming from overseas with honey that getting checked at port, and they opened the lid, and then the black beetles came out. And the guy told me that he saw that with his own eyes in 1998. And that's about 3 years before the DPI start to say we have Varroa in Australia, black beetles in Australia, the small hive beetle. So it came here much longer before the DPI was even ready to admit.
Okay, thanks, Dolfi. I have one final question, and then we're going to finish for tonight. This one is, why do you think we need a license to keep hives if you're just a recreational beekeeper, Steve?
Real simple. It's livestock. That's the only reason. Most cattle and sheep and all that, you have to have brands and things like that. So it was licensed back in the late 1800s, and it was mainly because it was a livestock stock, and they wanted to keep track of it. We are trying to work around that at the moment. So we are discussing that in industry. How can we say like 1 to 5 hives is free? But then I have other parts of the industry pushing back on it. This is something I'd love to see sorted. But yeah, so simple answer is it's livestock.
Thank you, Steve. And I just want to, on behalf of Community Voice Australia Central Coast, I just wanted to thank our speakers tonight and for their knowledge and experience through this 18 months. So that's with Kate, Simon, Steve, and Dolfi. I just wanted to thank you again. And we will be putting this recording once we edit it on our socials, and it'll be up on our website as well. I added in the email address if you would like some further information, Community Voice Central Coast at tutanota.com. Otherwise, have a good and safe evening, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Matt. See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for everyone coming.